Hello, friends. I'm Kush Khandelwal, and this is Ageless Athlete. A few years ago, I started asking questions that would not leave me alone. Why do some people keep pushing mentally, physically, spiritually long after others burn out or break down? What does it really mean to age well when you still crave movement, meaning, and mastery? This show is my search for answers. Each week, I talk to elite athletes, everyday adventurers, and pioneering researchers who are stretching the limits of what's possible across age, injury, illness, and self doubt. You will hear hard won lessons, untold stories, and science backed strategies for building a body and mindset that lasts. For those of us joining for the first time, welcome to the show. For the rest, thank you for joining us again. Time is our most valuable asset, and I deeply appreciate you giving me your time today.
Hello, friends. This is Kush Khandelwal from the Ageless Athlete Podcast. Welcome to part one of my Best of 2024 series. This podcast started in January of last year, and we released an episode every single week. And there are many of us who are joining for the first time. So whether you are listening to the podcast as a new listener, or you have been with us for much longer, I am sharing some incredible stories where I've had the privilege of speaking with athletes and adventurers who push themselves in ways most of us can hardly imagine sometimes. Climbing massive rock walls in record time, running ultra marathons over hundreds of miles, surfing giant waves, biking across entire continents, and more. But beyond the athletic feats, each story is really about facing adversity head on and discovering how to live with more courage, creativity, and joy. Whether you are a weekend jogger, a hardcore competitor, or someone who simply wants to stay active and engaged in life, these interviews offer inspiration for all. I have personally selected some of the best segments from last year for your listening pleasure. You will hear practical tips on recovery, fueling your body, and juggling injuries, but also the deep insights on mindset, community, and purpose that keeps these athletes going, even when the odds seem so stacked against them. So, put on those headphones or speakers and settle in and join me as we revisit some of these most surprising and uplifting moments from last year. First up is adaptive climber Craig DeMartino, whose life-altering accident while climbing led to the loss of a leg. Despite that huge setback, Craig continues to tackle major rock walls with a positivity and grit that's second to none. In this clip, he talks about reframing setbacks and focusing on the reaction rather than the circumstance.
So I signed my emails. I have no idea who said this first. I wish I knew. But it says life is 10% circumstance and 90% my reaction to those circumstances. And I think I've always been geared that way, where I've been a glass is half full kind of a person my whole life probably. But I think after getting injured and then as I've gotten older, I think it makes me really appreciate that and say, yeah, you know what, this particular thing sucks, whatever that is. How am I going to react to it? Am I going to just lose my mind and just, go down the rabbit hole? Or am I going to just, okay, I'm going to move away from this? And I've always told people, like, if you're moving and you're moving away from the trauma, that's a positive thing. If you're just spinning and staying in that same spot, then that becomes what defines you. And I don't think any of us want that negative thing or one thing to define who we are as a human, because in reality, it's just like a blip in the path. I mean, if you lay out your life in a linear line, that incident is one big bump, right? But it's like, it's not my whole life. So how I react to that is very important. And I kind of then put that into everything, like how I interface with people, the public, my family, my wife. That reaction is very valuable, and I get to control that. That's one of those things that we do have control over, and I think that if you are geared a certain way, you're going to do better. And so if you're constantly focused on the negative, obviously that's where you're going to be. Me, it's like I want to take that circumstance and let my reaction be a positive spin on that, whatever that's going to be. It works 99% of the time. It does not always work, and I think that everyone knows that, right? In life, you don't always bounce into the positive. Sometimes it's negative, and even then, you have to react a particular way. And so that reaction is going to dictate where you go from there. It's like you're going to have to deal with the negative. How are you going to react to it? And so for me, I can control that. It's kind of comforting to me to know that, okay, I can react to this a particular way that's going to either help it or hurt it. What's that going to look like? So I think that comes with age. That's one of the positives of getting older, is like you have the ability and perspective to like step back a little bit and be like, okay, what is actually happening here? And like, how is this going to work? As opposed to just like, firing off, and just usually it isn't the right thing to do. So it's nice to be able to have that maturity to sit back and say, okay, how am I going to react to this now? And then move forward with that. So that's been a good one for me.
Next is Mark Doc Renneker, both a physician and a legendary big wave surfer who's been pioneering remote surf spots for decades. Mark is now 73 and he still charges. He will share how humility in the face of nature's power is crucial, not just in surfing, but in everything.
I have a wave that I surf some hours north from here. I have a little 10 by 12 foot cabin, no electricity, on a cliff over a surf break. And then it looks out over, way out in the ocean, an outer reef spot that I first surfed in 85, 86. And it remains my favorite big wave spot in the world. And I've managed to keep it a secret for the most part and not let what befell Mavericks happen to it. And so I've had experiences out there that just would blow anyone's mind. And usually surfing alone, about a mile from shore. And the one that most comes to mind actually is, again, the lessons of hubris are critical to me. And so I had paddled out alone on a 10-9 brand new board that Jeff Clark made me. And it was, 20 to 25 foot, something like that. So that would be like 4 to 6 times overhead. And
wow.
And when I do this on my own to these outer reef spots, I promise myself I'll only take 3 waves. And the first wave, it'll be an easy one. I'm not going to say shoulder hop, but sort of. And the goal is to try and do it without getting my hair wet.
Okay.
Because again, it's not like Ocean Beach where you got to dive through the whitewater. These are places you can access through relatively calm water. It can take 45 minutes or an hour to paddle out. And then the third wave would be the only one that I would really kind of take a chance and sort of sit deeper, maybe a bigger wave, whatever. And so I'd already caught my first 2 waves. And then this fog bank appeared. And it would happen like so fast. It was like a bad special effect in a movie or something, but literally no visibility. And I don't know, 50 feet, something like that. And so I have my lineups out there based on way on shore sort of areas that I triangulate and figure out where I am and to where the wave would break. But I also know the kelp bed pretty well and the boils pretty well. And I said, okay, I know where I'm sitting. I'll just wait for the fog to lift because I really want to get that third wave. And, it was kind of amazing because as soon as I sort of had convinced myself that I would get a third wave. This giant wave broke outside of me. Just, I didn't even see it coming. We're talking huge, huge wave. Throw your board away, dive as deep as you can. The leash breaks.
Oh, goodness.
It's one of those things where it's so violent that it sort of launches you back up from the depths like a torpedo shooting out of the water or something. And I go, oh man, this will be a challenge. And I just looked at my watch. It was 3:47. I remember exactly. And I thought, there's time. It was dead of winter, so it was going to turn dark at 5. And I wasn't really worried about swimming in. I've practiced swimming in out there before. It's really tricky to swim in. You have to swim in through these rocks, and we call it the keyhole, and it's formidable. But really what I was worried was to find my new board. And I have a pretty good idea where the boards go from having happened before, but never in the dense fog. And part of it was that you had to stay with where the waves were breaking because that's where the board would go, which meant that you had to let these still giant waves just you. And I did all of the above and was swimming around out in the ocean again about a mile offshore, looking for my board in the fog and never found it.
Okay.
And then finally swam in, and my car was parked pretty far away. And so I'm running along the road with my broken leash. And now the sun's come out. Now I can see everything. And all I want to do is get binoculars so I can look for it. And some guy driving by who recognizes me, he says, "Doc, what are you doing?" I said, "I just lost my board." And he goes, "You were fucking out there?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Could you help me find my board?" And he said, yeah, great. So he's got binoculars too. And so we stood on the cliff and just watched and watched and watched. Never found the board, turned dark, and that was the end of the day.
I've been thinking a lot about energy, not just in training, but in recovery, in focus, in how we age. So when I came across NutriSense, it hit home. It's a program that pairs a 24/7 glucose biosensor with a dedicated dietitian to help you understand how your body responds to food, stress, sleep, and movement, and then act on the data. I chose it because I wanted something real, not another hack or one size fits all plan, just honest insight into what's actually going on inside me and how to build habits that last. NutriSense has helped over 150,000 people take that step. And if you want to try it, you can get 33% off your first month with code Ageless15 at nutrisense.io. Again, that's nutrisense.io, code Ageless15. You can also find this information on the show notes for this episode. In this follow-up, Doc Renneker explains how his diet evolved from daily burgers to mostly plant-based and pescatarian, the role of supplements like NAC and vitamin D, and the value of functional medicine for performance and wellness.
In terms of nutrition,
Yeah.
all through medical school and even for a long time thereafter, I used to have a hamburger every day.
Okay.
And I found that I could study medicine or, for medical school, best sort of sitting at a restaurant. I used to go to Bill's Place over on Clement Street. And I'd sit in the back there, and they just loved taking care of me, the medical student. And they would bring me all kinds of treats and things. I was never good at studying in a library or something like that. At some point, I did herniate a disc. And one of the things that I began to explore was, okay, maybe I'll become, vegetarian or pescatarian. And that was in about 1990. I've been essentially that since. I gave up chicken and pork and turkey and, all the red meats for sure. And it's interesting, the one time I slipped, as it were, was in the Antarctica trip. The captain owned an island in the Falklands where he would raise his own lambs, and he had all this frozen lamb. And, there is something wonderful about lamb. There just is, and so I got ill from eating lamb again after about 2 days. And that was in the year 2000 when we did that trip. I haven't had red meat since.
Sure. Got it. Pescatarian, almost completely vegetarian. Any supplements?
Yeah, actually there are. I'm a believer in N-acetylcysteine or NAC, which is, when you swallow it, it's a prodrug for what's called glutathione. Glutathione is the chemical that a huge number of cells in your body produce as a way of cleansing the organs. To give you an example, NAC, if you go mushroom collecting with the next rain up the coast, and you pick the wrong mushroom and eat it, and your liver's being destroyed and you're orange as a pumpkin, and you present to the emergency room, the very first therapy they would give you would be intravenous NAC. In other words, to save your liver. So NAC is something that cleanses the organs, including the kidneys, including the lungs, including the heart, including the brain. I've always taken additional amounts of vitamin D, on the order of about like 5,000 units a day. I've always liked magnesium. Take some extra magnesium. And then a friend of mine who's a nutritional oncologist, who is in the Chicago area, and he's a surfer also. He actually went on the Antarctica trip, and he and I surf Lake Michigan and places like that together.
Sure.
But he has these supplements that he's put together that are sort of a gamish of, 15 or 20 things that would sort of be everything you might find at Whole Foods. And I've always taken some of that.
Okay.
Oh, a little bit of curcumin, a little bit of fish oil, but not too much. If these things cause you to bleed, I did find for a while I was taking sort of preventative low dose or, baby aspirin. But boy, I just found, even like punching through a lip, I would get these little, ecchymoses, little, sort of bleeds under the skin on my face. So I cut that out.
I don't take any supplements. I'm 44, and I sometimes don't even know where to get started. It seems there's so much variety and so many types. And then there are also, the snake oil sales people out there peddling their own motley potions. I will have to put in more research.
The research gets very easy. There's a branch of integrative medicine called functional medicine.
Sure. Yes,
the principle of it is that you look for biomarkers. And if you want to not shotgun with supplements, so biomarkers would be, looking at micronutrient levels in the blood, looking at vitamin levels in the blood, looking at inflammatory markers, coagulation markers, immune function. All of these things are easily done. And what's really interesting now in the field of health is that there's a lot of direct-to-consumer ability of ordering all the lab tests that you otherwise would have to depend on physicians for. So you can go to like direct.com and you can order virtually anything that a physician would order. And if you want to, play around and look online under what I would call terrain panel. So you want to look at not the disease qualities of one's body, but the terrain, meaning the healthy part of your body. And you look at what the normal levels would be for you name it, magnesium or C-reactive protein or things of that nature, and all the different antioxidants and all that, and then you would say, oh gosh, I'm below normal. I don't know why that is, but I'll start taking such and such, more zinc. And then in 3 months, I'll recheck that on that dose of zinc and see if I'm hitting the level that I want, some optimal level, ideally on the upper range of normal.
Got it.
And at least then, you're not shotgunning. You're actually working with your own physiology from a standpoint of knowledge.
Yeah, I know that is very sanguine advice. Somebody else recommended functional medicine to me for just the same sort of concerns I had about shooting in the dark. And I think, thank you for reinforcing that.
Well, and the other thing to say in the field of sports medicine, again, they tend to be evidence-based, but they tend to be more data-driven. And so, you can get a lot of good data in terms of exercise physiology and sports medicine, or in terms of physiatry or physical therapy, degrees of motion, even just resting tension in the body, these can be measured. And that's what the elite athletes are working with, whether they be swimmers or rock climbers or what have you. A lot of them, they get to that level by at some point kind of going into, as it were, the biomarkers or the science of that which they're endeavoring to do. All those guys on the Warriors.
Yes.
They know their numbers.
Oh, wow. Okay. Got it.
And all the rest of us are farting around.
Got it. I mean, no, there's no doubt that those sports that have a lot of money in them, those sports have certainly embraced a lot of science. And I think sports like ours, and obviously I'm not like an athlete of that caliber. I think the rest of us kind of have to just take that lead and learn from people who are doing those things and not reinvent the proverbial. So no, I think you're right.
No, the goal is to reinvent the wheel. In other words, to learn something often is for you to learn it the first time. Somebody else may have learned it, but for whatever reason, it never transferred into your realm.
Right.
You can cognitively or intellectually understand it.
Sure.
But, and I think it does help when you even, maybe this is the ultimate purpose of your series, is trying on these other strategies of people and see what fits for you. And that's, of course, that's how we all go through life.
Here's Lee, a dedicated climber who's tried just about every supplement and hormone therapy out there. Lee Sheftel is 77, and he's still amongst the top end of rock climbers. He has tried testosterone, human growth hormone, creatine, you name it. After all that, he's got some surprising conclusions about what truly works and why simpler approaches often pay off.
I'm pretty much convinced that, we need to eat protein.
Do you take like whey or vegan pea protein?
I've been using pea protein for now a couple of years. Before that, I was doing whey protein, and I just decided that I like pea protein better. And my smoothies are just fruit, some yogurt, orange juice, frozen blueberries and pineapple. That's it. And then I add some other powders, glutamine for recovery. I don't know how well that stuff works, really. So I've done a lot of experimentation with some more serious stuff. I didn't find that they did anything for me.
When you said serious stuff, what is some of that stuff?
Testosterone.
Oh.
So not only oral, but I've actually, for a brief period of time, I was this one health professional was convincing me that I should do injectable testosterone.
Why do you think they advised? Was it like a health condition or performance goals?
Supposedly, according to inject yourself with testosterone when you get older, it keeps a lot of things going stronger, your libido, whatever.
Oh.
But the only thing that I noticed, which are two bad things, nothing good, by the way. I didn't get any stronger. I was using it for a couple of years. My wife told me that I got angrier, which was not pleasant for her. And the other thing that happened, which is even worse, is that my PSA levels.
The prostate.
Antigen, what that stands for. Prostate
Got it.
antigen. So your PSA levels, which means you're supposed to be typically under level of 4, and I went up at one point to a level of 9. And I had to go to a urologist, and the urologist was telling me that I can't remember what he told me I needed to do, but at the time I was thinking, well, maybe it's the testosterone. So I stopped doing the testosterone, and this has already been like a number of years ago.
Sure.
And my PSA levels dropped all the way back down to normal.
Oh, wow. So the testosterone contributed to the PSA level rise.
Yeah. I also at one point tried some HGH, human growth hormone.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know that was, isn't that like a banned substance or?
Well, it's banned for competition athletes, but you can get a prescription for it, probably from somebody.
Mm.
Also, some people smuggle it in from South America or whatever. I don't know where they get it, but they told me that the amount that I was taking was not strong enough to really do anything, and it's very expensive. So injectable testosterone is not that expensive. Sure. HGH is very expensive. So anyway, I tried that. The other thing I've tried, which a lot of people use, again, I don't find that it does anything for me. Matter of fact, it has a negative effect. Some people swear by it, which is creatine.
Okay.
And so I tried that, and I find it had a negative effect. So a lot of these performance-enhancing drugs, I don't find they do much of anything. So I just stopped taking.
Creatine seems to be widely embraced these days. Actually, I take creatine sometimes. Mm-hmm. I used to lift, but it's been a long time. Then I used to take more creatine, and now I take creatine now. And I do know that I get slightly more ripped when I take creatine, but then I stop taking it. And I think all of that water weight it just kind of drains back down. So I can't really say if it helps performance with timing much.
Yeah, see, I can't really say any of that stuff that I've taken over the years helps my performance. The only thing I can say that really helps when I keep my weight down. I don't have much of a weight problem, but I do now because after the surgery screwed up my appetite and I started eating like I'm not doing it now, but I was just eating all kinds of stuff that overdoing it. It was good food, but just overdoing it. Probably put on about 10 pounds. And anyway, I have found that over the years that when I lose weight, even 3 or 4 pounds, I can feel the difference in my climate.
Meet Megan Canfield, an ultra runner who has been at the top of the ultra running field for decades. Ultra runs being runs which are 50 miles, 100 miles, sometimes even greater. Megan is incredible. She peaked in her running career in her 50s. Here she breaks down her structured yet flexible training cycles, her fueling approach, and the mental strategies that help her tackle races lasting all day and beyond. How do you train? Prepare yourself for something as ridiculous to most of us as a 100-mile run.
Used to be a lot more miles than I do now. Kind of wondering, like, maybe I never had to do as many miles as I thought I did. But basically, 6 months out from a race, basically, I'll run easy most days. But I'll have some pretty fast, intense workouts, like once a week. Short intervals, really high power, just to get my VO2 max kind of stimulated, see if it's up where as high as it can be for a month or two with just easy runs, not very long runs, maybe 12 miles or so. And then shift into longer intervals that are a little bit slower, but kind of like 10K efforts for a couple months as the one speed workout a week. And then I'll start increasing my long run. And I'll probably get up to like a 30-mile long run. I used to do, I haven't done this too much in the past few years, back-to-back long runs, maybe a 30-mile run one day and then a, 10 or 15-mile run the next day. I don't recover as well as I used to, so I haven't really done that as much, but I don't think I need to. I mean, I know how to do this distance. As Yogi Berra said, 50% of the game is 95% mental, something like that. So I know how to do it. I'm not afraid of the distance. So I don't feel like I have to do back-to-back long runs. I think they're harder on me now than they used to be. In the last few months before the race, I'll still do intervals, but they'll be much longer and more like a marathon effort. All of it's just to basically trickle down to that all-day effort. It's going to be a little bit faster than if I hadn't done any speed work at all, because that's basically the bottom line is you want your slog to be not as slow as it was 6 months before. And yeah, just spend a lot of time outside running around in the hills.
Sounds like you have a plan usually, and I'm guessing your plan and the way you train has been instructed by all the years of running and racing prior to that. Between feeling and science, trying to get a sense of how carefully you track and measure your performance and educate your training versus how you feel. It's a topic that fascinates me as I talk to other athletes in our age group and genre of how they use the biofeedback and the data feedback. Where do you use that information?
I used to use it a lot when I was still faster than I am now. Before I started to slow down, I definitely would look at it a lot. I look at it mostly as information. Years ago, I did heart rate training because that's what people did. And I learned from that how to run slower on my easy days instead of just always run on the edge. So that was very useful. We don't really use heart rate as much as we use, your rate of perceived exertion because that's kind of more meaningful. Yeah, in the past, I'd do a run and then I'd go back and I'd look at it. And that would tell me how I did. And I'd think, well, that's about what I thought. No, I didn't feel so great. And it shows. Or I might have felt like, I felt really good. And look at that. It's true. I did feel really good. I ran really fast today. I'm not too obsessed with numbers. I just don't have time. I'm not that curious about the numbers. My training log is Strava. I don't have a book and write it down. I go back and look at Strava. Oh, so that's how much I ran this week. Okay, cool. But I know people do love numbers and they love spreadsheets. And I'm just not one of those people for my own running.
I'm guessing that you've learned so much. You have your body and your heart and your muscles have this deep internal memory bank.
Yeah.
And you can subliminally tease out things about your performance and whatnot that maybe younger runners or less experienced people haven't quite developed the capacity for. A question here, which also is something that is very fascinating to me, which is in running as well as other sports, the age span of peak performance seems to have kept going up. So when one looks at marathon runners, one looks at even a different kind of sport like American football, one sees that people are peaking later and later in life. Is that also true for ultra runners?
Yeah, I think so. I think it takes a while to really find your potential as an ultra runner because you can't go run one every weekend. I mean, if you did, you wouldn't last very long. You would burn out or get injured. So many things that happen in one race. So let's say you had 3 problems in your first ultra. Like, okay, I got blisters. I threw up. I was dehydrated. And so, okay, those 3 things. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I get my feet in the right shoes and socks. I'm going to lube my feet up. And I'm going to make sure that whatever I eat, I've practiced with, and it's going to be fine. And then I'm going to make sure that I drink enough. Okay, so you got all those 3 things. You go to the next ultra, and you have 5 different problems. So it's like, I thought I fixed everything. Or if you're like me, you still do rookie mistakes. It's like, well, I figured this one thing out, but then I forgot to do it again. It's like, you figured that out 5 years ago, and you just blew it. So it does take a while. I think it takes a while to peak. I think I probably took maybe 4 or 5 years to, have my best Western States, best 100-miler because of mistakes I would make along the way and sort of figure those out. And the biggest thing is just that everyone has to learn is just how to problem solve and to do it quickly, not just realize, got a hot spot on my foot or wonder what that's going to do. Well, you're at mile 30. You're probably going to have a blister by mile 50. So you need to take care of it soon.
You said this yourself that you peaked in your 50s, right? Some of your best performances. So yeah, this is not gymnastics, when you're peaking and reaching puberty at the same time. This is a different sport. If you were 30 years old again and somebody was to ask you, Megan, when do you think you would be peaking? What would you have said then? And then in your case, beyond what you have said already about everything else I went in, what do you think helped you keep pushing your performance as you got older?
Yeah, I think in my 30s, I would have thought I'd probably peak in my 40s, maybe, just because I didn't run in college, so it was like the age of myself as my runner age, and I felt like I had a very good cardiovascular system. Yeah, I probably would have thought maybe my 40s. when I was in my 40s, I was having a fair bit of hip pain and some sort of imbalances. And this goes back to like being injured and figuring out what was going on. And honestly, I was ready to like, okay, when I'm turned 50, I'm going to retire from competitive running because this hip thing is just hurting so much. And I got connected to a physical therapist who just did amazing things. She really unwound a lot of problems that I had developed and from repetitive stress. But my mind was definitely on this whole idea, well, there is a problem with some imbalances and we can fix those. And I fixed them and it turned everything back around. And so then I had even more time, again, to continually to build on my distances, build up more strength. And so I think it just took that much longer. So maybe it's more of okay, I peaked, let's see, when did I start running ultras? 40s, peaked in my 50s. So maybe it takes 10 years to peak. Maybe the 30-year-olds are going to peak when they're 40 or the 20-year-olds are going to peak when they're 30. I don't know. That's just a wild guess, really. But, at some point, we're not going to keep improving, but it can take a while, I'm sure.
How do you fuel yourself during a race? And what are you eating when you're not running?
When I'm not running, basically a Whole Foods. I like food to look like the source it came from. I avoid highly processed foods. I like to eat rice and vegetables and meat, sourced locally, not tainted with antibiotics and hormones. And I grew up on a farm, so it's sort of how I ate growing up. I just don't do junk most of the time, sometimes, but it's pretty rare.
Do you watch your nutrient intake as well, like the balance between the larger nutrient types, carbs versus protein, fats, any supplementation that you take that has worked for you, maybe something that has not worked for you?
I don't count my macros, but I am currently working on consuming more protein. This is very important for postmenopausal women because we lose muscle mass when we lose our estrogen. So I do supplement with a whey powder. When I remember, it's not very tasty. But when I remember to do that, I will add like sardines they're not local, but they are a very good source of protein. And so I will often just throw a can of sardines on whatever I'm eating. I take vitamin D because I live in the Northwest and it's really disgusting and gray here most of the time. I take creatine, which is also shown in women, especially to help maintain muscle mass. I take a variety of immune support, mushroom immune support, and I take ashwagandha for stress because post-menopause, now I'm a stressed person. I was like, I don't know what that's about. But anyway, there's something else. Oh, I'm on hormone therapy for post-menopause also. That's because, for one thing, I have anxiety that I didn't have before. I still have vasomotor issues with heat at night. And also I have osteoporosis, which is genetic. Both my grandmother and my mother have had osteoporosis, so I'm on medication for that. And that's again where I'm surprised I haven't had a stress fracture, but I think my mechanics must be helping me out in that sense because pretty thin bones. So those are the supplements I take, and they're helping for sure. And then when I'm racing, I actually do almost all liquids. I don't generate any spit when I'm running, and I just have the worst time trying to ingest food. I mean, it just doesn't want to go down. So I've been pretty lucky that I can drink most sports drink. I have to be a little bit picky about them. The big molecules like the maltodextrins don't absorb very well, but some of the glucose, sucrose, those ones I can get in pretty well. And then I will stop at an aid station and I'll eat bananas. I can get bananas down. I can also drink chocolate milk. I will drink chocolate milk when I have a drop bag or if I have crew. But generally, if I just keep drinking the sports drink and even soda, I mean, I've done a lot on soda. It's calories, they go in, and that can keep me going better than trying to eat a sandwich. It's just like, well, I'm going to fail.
Friends, it means a lot that you're here. I pour a ton of heart into the show. The research, the interviews, the editing, it's all me, trying to share stories that matter. If Ageless Athlete has ever made you feel seen, inspired you, or just kept you company on a long drive, or better, over a run or a bike ride, I would be so grateful if you considered supporting it. Even a small amount helps keep it going, helps keep bringing the show to you for free. You can chip in at buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. Again, buymeacoffee.com/agelessathlete. You can find the link on the show notes as well. Thank you for listening and for being part of this. Natasha Barnes is a climber turned competitive powerlifter whose first-hand experience with strength training changed how she rehabs and trains other athletes. She will bust a few myths about lifting heavy and explain why having more muscle is a game changer for aging athletes.
So I had good climbing technique, but I really felt like I lacked like just sheer strength. So working on that and learning how to develop actual strength seemed interesting to me. And so I ended up going to that studio and hiring one of the trainers there and getting into strength training. And it helped like it so much. It helped my climbing so much. It completely resolved like multiple shoulder injuries that I was experiencing. I got rid of a lot of aches and pains that I was experiencing. And ever since then, I decided to start incorporating that into what I do with climbers for rehab and also what I do with climbers for like training. And also kind of got swept up in the sport as well. And also decided to start competing in powerlifting. And I've been doing that for the last 10 years. I took a little break from climbing. I think I took 6 years off of climbing to just focus on powerlifting. Gained weight to be competitive in powerlifting and put on muscle. And yeah, I'm a competitive powerlifter. I have like multiple state records and I have an elite level total and I'm 40 years old and I feel like better than I ever have. It's been quite a journey, but it's been a really, really good one. And I've been lucky enough to be able to impact the community in a positive way by spreading the message of strength training to a lot of the athletes that I work with. I think some people are just lucky. I mean, a lot of like elite level athletes are just going to have superior genetics and they're just going to be able to handle more than the average person or somebody who doesn't have those genetics. I mean, I know a lot of elite level climbers. I won't name any names, but like some of the stuff that like they've told me that they're doing, I'm just like, wow, you are honestly like succeeding in spite of yourself because what you're doing does not sound sustainable. It does not sound good, but somehow you're still winning competitions doing that health behavior or like doing that crazy training program. And I think a lot of the time it's just elite genetics that allow and luck that allows people to do that. And then for some people, I think they maybe did have an athletic background before climbing, or they diversify in other sports, or they switch to other sports periodically and come back to climbing. And it's just more sustainable that way for a lot of people. That would be my thought.
It's fine to not take names, but maybe can you talk to a couple of things those people are doing which make your eyes pop?
Yeah, I mean, one that comes to mind right away is I talked to a professional climber who was at a competition that I was at, and they were like, yeah, I've been here and I've just been eating like way too many croissants while I've been here. So after this competition, I'm going to do the protein diet. You've probably heard about it before. And I was like, the protein diet? What is that? Basically, their plan was to do this like detox diet that was called the protein diet, where you only eat protein for 10 days and you don't eat anything else. No carbs, no sugar, no fiber, nothing, just protein for 10 days. And according to them, it was like going to detox their system, get the sugar out of their system and reset them so that they could feel better and, compete in the next month or so. And I was like, that sounds like a really bad idea. Your training is probably not going to feel good if you're not eating like any carbohydrates to support that training. Like, of course, protein is great, but like you need carbs to fuel your training sessions. And they were like, oh, well, I'm just not going to climb for those 10 days. I'm just going to do the diet, not climb, not train. And then I'll start training again after. I'm like, okay, so you're going to take 10 days off, do this crazy diet, and then go to nationals and compete. And they ended up doing that. They ended up winning nationals. So it's just, all right. So some people succeed in spite of themselves and for no other reason sometimes other than they're just great athletes and they're very lucky. That's just one example that I can think of where if a normal person did that, they would probably not feel great. They would probably lose some strength and probably not compete well after just completely taking 10 days off of their sport and doing like an extreme diet.
Folks, the croissant to protein diet helps you win nationals. You heard it here first.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes professional athletes are probably not the best people to get like training or even health advice from because, you know, sometimes they're just lucky. Oh my God, so many facepalm moments. I would for sure train differently. Like probably the biggest thing I would change is I would add strength training in. So for a lot of people, a good bang for your buck is going to be compound exercises. So exercises that use multiple joints and use lots of muscle. That way you're not trying to do 15 different exercises in each training session to hit like different muscles. You can do 3 or 4 exercises that are going to have your bases covered. I think one of the things that I find climbers doing is trying to follow like bodybuilding programs or powerlifting programs and trying to use those as a way to cross train or to using those as their strength training. And we don't need to do bodybuilding style programming because that's usually split up in like body parts.
Eric Horst is a world-renowned climbing coach, author, and researcher. He is 60 now, I believe, and is still rock climbing in the highest grades. Here he dives into topics like cold plunges, sauna use, and balancing intermittent fasting with the demands of serious training, especially for climbers wanting longevity in the sport. I learned some surprising truths in this conversation. Cryotherapy, intermittent fasting, and if there's maybe one other thing you want to throw in there on new modalities.
Yeah, so those things both kind of fall in the category of biohacking, I guess you would say, and there are certainly a myriad of other things that would fit into that category as well that athletes consider, or even people interested in longevity are interested in. And definitely my ears are wide open to all of that stuff. And I've explored a lot of that research. When I turned 50, which is now 10 years ago, but when I turned 50, it was kind of a wake-up call for me in terms of, it's like, oh my God, my life is now probably more over than it is, there's more of my life behind me now than there is left in front of me. But if I want to try to, stay in the game and have this, have a above average health span and lifespan, I need to really get serious and be more proactive in training smarter and also anti-aging, longevity kind of things. I've explored all of these things. I have out in my garage, I have a sauna that I purchased at about age 50 or 51 because there's a lot of value to regular sauna use in terms of your cardiovascular fitness, heart health, your mitochondria function, and just even as a recovery modality, post-workout, sitting in the sauna for 20, 30 minutes, and sweating a little bit of a detox. There's some research that shows it's quite helpful. In terms of the cold, the cryotherapy, there are a number of different uses, and it's hard to give a single answer because the uses, a lot of people don't understand some of the nuance there. But cold is, well, first of all, if you just finished playing a tackle football game, or if you just came off a one-day ascent of the Nose of El Capitan, like Hans Florine does, those things are both brutally grueling on your body in terms of their punishing activities, their very hard activities, and there's a strong inflammatory response that you can tamp down if you do a cold bath post game. And that's been a common thing with NFL players for many years. But other activities, if you're riding the Tour de France, you might do some cold baths at the end of the ride every day to kind of control inflammation. But in terms of using it regularly, there's some evidence that, if you tamp down that inflammation chronically on a day-to-day basis over the long term, you actually take away some of your training adaptations. So, in terms of controlling inflammation, it might be useful and helpful after extraordinarily stressful, punishing days. But after run-of-the-mill workouts, it could actually be counterproductive to do an ice bath. There's also these short-term cold plunges where you're just plunging for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, which that's not enough to really affect the inflammatory response, but it is a stimulus for developing these heat shock proteins that are also the sauna can generate as well. That it has benefits in terms of longevity and health and wellness. Aside from, a climber or a football player might take an ice bath and sit in there for 10 or 20 minutes. So that's a completely different protocol than the 90-second plunge that is very common that people do for heat shock protein. And then there's potential benefits if you're someone that needs to create more brown fat, that mitochondria-rich fat that generates heat. You could do some cold bath protocols that help that out. But again, that's a very nuanced use of cold plunges. And so I don't think people should mindlessly cold plunge without knowing what the proper protocol is and what they're hoping to get out of it. The sauna is a little more forgiving. The sauna, it's like you sit in there and you do 20, 30, 40 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week. And there's a myriad of health benefits to using the sauna. I forget, what was the other kind of biohack thing that you had mentioned?
Intermittent fasting.
Oh, intermittent fasting. Yeah. And that's another one that, hey, I'm going to admit that I was all into that maybe 6 or 8 years ago. I got into this habit of waking up in the morning. I would have my coffee, but I would not eat anything until about 1 p.m. And then all my food would be between 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. And so it was the classic kind of 18, 6, protocol, or 16-8 protocol, however you want to slice it and dice it. And while I kind of understood the science behind it, the autophagy benefits, the longevity benefits, there's a bunch of mouse studies that show that if you underfeed them, they live longer. But those mice aren't trying to train for climbing. They're not trying to train for climbing 513. I am. And what I discovered was by not consuming protein, my first 6 waking hours, it was a terrible decision, especially as a middle-aged climber. But I think for anybody, even my sons who are in their 20s, I would not recommend for them, as hard as they train. They train so hard, many days doing 2 workouts a day, that their body is in a catabolic state much of the day.
Hello, friends. Just a quick break. This is not an ad. If you have been enjoying these conversations, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. It is where I go deeper, sharing stories, reflections, and behind the scenes insights that don't always make it into the podcast. I write about what I'm learning from elite athletes and how to stay ageless in body and mind. If you have ever wanted a thoughtful, inspiring read that ties it all together, training, aging, mindset, and awe, you will love this. You can find the link in the show notes or just head to agelessathlete.co. Again, www.agelessathlete.co, that is, to sign up. And yeah, just a couple of emails a month, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Absolutely no spam ever. Okay, back to the show.
Speed climbing legend Hans Florin has broken multiple records on El Capitan's formidable The Nose Big Wall Climb. If you have ever wondered how he keeps it lighthearted, focuses on the journey, and picks the right partners, This clip will show you why Hans is the master of making big wall climbing fun.
We'll start with not enjoyed, because I mean, effectively, I can say quite solidly that if there's people that have qualities I don't enjoy, then I experience it with them once and I don't climb with them again or don't adventure with them again. I don't try to change people too much, so because I don't like people lecturing to me either. Something might be, this sounds very like philosophical, but somebody who's interested in the summit or the end and not so much being present during the journey. It sounds very philosophical, but I point out that Yosemite is a ditch. And when you, quote, top out on El Cap or Half Dome, you're not on top of a peak like, some 2001 Space Odyssey on top of an obelisk. All you've done is crawled out of a ditch. You're not even at the highest point on the rim.
Yeah.
You still have to hike another couple hundred feet to get to, quote, the highest altitude point. Nobody does. It's about that face of climbing, the struggle for those 3,000 feet, which that is a excellent representation of about the journey, not the end, right? So people that go up with me for a half day or a 3/4 day and we get rained off and we're laughing as we're getting soaking wet and we're shivering, that type person that is like, instead of crying, they're laughing, like, we're going to have a good story to tell when we get back to the bar, if we get back to the bar tonight and have a hot chocolate or whatever, hot toddy. That's the type person I like to go climbing with. And, to that, although I have suffered, often when I do public speaking for a bank, I always say bank or pharmaceutical or whatever, I have to explain I'm not the M word climber, which is mountaineer. I'm a t-shirt and shorts climber. I've dabbled in quite a bit of mountaineering, but I really like being present there with shirt off or t-shirt and shorts in the sun over, shivering in a snow cave and then bragging to my buddy in the bar, like, oh, I've suffered more than you. I know you haven't. I suffered even worse. There was a time I was stuck in this snow cave for 7 days or something, and I do think, I don't know. When someone says everyone should try it once, I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't try mountaineering once. I've done it more than a couple times and done type 2 or 1, whatever, fun suffering. And it's interesting, but 95% of my climbing the last couple decades has been t-shirts and shorts, sort of sunny climbing weather. So did I get to that question about partners? Partners need to be competent, which doesn't mean they need to climb hard. They just need to be competent at the skills of the adventure we're on, and that goes from every grade to 5-1 to 5-14. They need to be competent, and then they need to be easygoing, which means the outcome doesn't matter. We're going to have fun applying the skills we have with us to this, this terrain, whatever it is in front of them.
Mohit Oberoi is the ultimate cross trainer, running, climbing, cycling, and more. He shares how he manages lingering injuries, listens to his body, and knows when to pivot sports so he can stay active for the long run.
I feel I'm getting actually stronger than I was, or fitter than I was maybe 15 years ago. If I train something well, because I think I'm training more wisely now. I'm recovering better. As a young person, even I see my sons, they will just climb like mad and not recover at all. Now, I think I'm more patient with my recovery part. If I need recovery days, I take that extra recovery days, because that's why when you get stronger, right? So I am feeling much better than what I was doing a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Because of training a little more wisely, I'm using my head a little more, much more, I would think, which also includes that included a few things like I'm working with a physio who I regularly visit once in 4 to 5 weeks. Even if I don't have an issue, I would go back, because this is something I did not do. I had a debilitating elbow tendonitis, what is called golfer's elbow, when I was climbing about 20 years ago. And that completely stopped me from even climbing, because it was so painful that in that time there was very low information, as you would know, about elbow and climbing injuries, climbing related injuries. Now you have a host of information and podcasts and doctors and research. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, there was just some articles written here and there, and one had to manage. I even ended up taking cortisone injections, which was wrong. It brought back the injury right away. So that stopped me for a bit, which was elbow tendonitis. But now I've had some issues like Achilles tendonitis 2 years ago when I was running. But I've been working with a very good physio. I go to him once in 4 or 5 weeks, and we work through the injuries. I'm managing to solve that problem before it becomes too much. Right now, I'm battling a bit of a irritated rotator cuff because I was climbing and swimming a lot. Last winter, a couple of months ago, I was close to the sea, so I was putting in a few miles of swimming a day, and that is not swimming and climbing don't go very well together in terms of shoulder stability. This is what I think. At least long distance swimming. That is irritating me. Now working with that on it. So I'm constantly working on putting the niggles away, not stopping me from completely doing something. If I have a problem with my shoulder or something, I would just switch to cycling, or I would switch to running more. Let the physio happen with my shoulder so that doesn't get taxed. Rather than beating up my shoulder by climbing again and again, or go stand-up paddleboarding or kayaking or something which will hurt the shoulder more. So that switch I'm willing to make. I'm willing to compromise and say, okay, my shoulder's hurting, don't climb so much, do the physio, do something else. And I'm happy with that because I'm happy doing any activity. So it doesn't really, the switch is not such a compromise. I don't find it a compromise. Of course, you find that, I was supposed to do this project this winter, it's not happened, blah, 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 whatever, it's sad. I mean, I should be climbing that. But I don't mind that anymore. The fact I'm grateful that I can actually make the switch and happy that I can at least do that keeps me grounded. I think this is minor problems. So making the switch, acceptance that yes, this activity will have to be my project, Red Point project for this winter is not going to happen this winter because of my shoulder, or maybe make it worse if I'm trying to do it. Is not such an upsetting thing anymore. Earlier, I would probably brood over it and not care about it or keep throwing myself at it. But now I don't. I make the switch pretty fast and enjoy the process actually of doing other stuff. So I think that is helping out in terms of that is, keeping the regularity of your physio going, keeping a check on the body is probably because I'm aiming here is what is longevity, right? What is my goal right now is longevity, is how I can keep an active lifestyle for as much as I can do. So that's the game. That's the end game, actually, really.
Okay, now we go back to this conversation with a group of mountain biking legends from the San Francisco Bay Area, and we meet Henrietta, who's in her 70s now. And as an avid mountain biker, she has faced major health hurdles, but found a way to keep riding and competing, all while staying upbeat, even when doctors told her she might never race again.
I'm an emotional person, so just let me cry for a second. First of all, I'm not a national ranked, even though I did win nationals one year as a beginning, but I'm not a national ranked athlete like many of the people who've been on your podcast, but I was a pretty good cross-country racer for several years, and I'd win local races. I'd win Sea Otter Classic, which is a pretty big regional race. Actually, people come from all over the country. So I was, a very good climber and kind of a scaredy cat going downhill. But I did 1 year in 2010, I won Sea Otter. The next year, I was dead last. And I was dead last because I didn't realize that I had been dealing with atrial fibrillation for several months and couldn't quite understand why some weeks I'm just on fire and other weeks I could barely make it up the hill. And it turns out I was carted away in an ambulance at the finish line of that 2011 Sea Otter Classic, not able, with a very irregular heart and passing out and not being able to even get up. There's a funny story. You can edit this out, but I have to say it just because I think these folks will get a laugh. I'm on the ground. We had just taken, meaning many folks in our MORCA group, had taken wilderness first aid. And my one excitable friend is trying to find a pulse to make sure I'm okay. And I can't find a pulse, and I remember laying there and saying, I'm conscious, I'm speaking, do not start CPR.
You have to keep that.
Anyway.
That's crazy. Yeah.
So they carted away, in an ambulance, ended up in the hospital, and that started a whole saga of, medications, feeling very depressed, very suicidal, and that my whole identity and world and social life and everything that was wrapped around riding mountain bikes and stuff at that time was gone. And I remember hearing a guy as they were sort of carting me off in the ambulance saying, oh, her racing career is over. And I remember thinking, no, it isn't. But he was right. It was, at least that type of racing. In many tears, 2 heart surgeries later, coming back slowly. I did start racing again and this was when I was 57. This happened when I was 65. I thought, I can do enduro, because at that time I had taken more clinics. I had gotten more proficient going downhill. And the enduro racing is, roughly 15 miles, maybe lots of different hills and dales, but you're not racing the entire time. You're only racing the 4 mostly downhill timed segments. And you can take your time going from point A to B to C to D. And so I just fell in love with that immediately, especially the second, at least this past year, the second, you have the classic downhill course at the Sea Otter Classic, dual slalom, which is built just for those 4 days, and then a few trails at the Fort Ord National Monument or the course, and then a long ride back. But again, you're not racing back, you're just getting back. So that's really evolved into doing that ever since I was 65. I don't travel all around the world and the country and whatever to do it. But it also has just opened up such a wonderful world of traveling and going to Downeyville and Mount Huff and Lake Tahoe and all these wonderful places where now I'm a relatively slow climber. I do have to be aware of my heart rate, but I'm a much more proficient downhiller. And it just brings me a tremendous amount of joy to do that. And just this year, to celebrate my 70th birthday, because I volunteer a lot at Sea Otter, I haven't been able to race the dual slalom. But I said, I'm not volunteering as much. And I raced the dual slalom, which I just absolutely love and had a lot of fun. And Jenna and I were with that, in that together. We actually had to race for the bronze medal and she won.
What a beautiful and powerful story, Henry. And I was actually also marveling that you were able to share, or you were recounting this medical catastrophe that you went through, and you were smiling and just almost giggling the whole time. I think it just shows your ability to take maybe what has come your way with this level of poise and demeanor. One thing I want to make sure I understand is, you said earlier that you were maybe not as proficient at going downhill. You were maybe better at climbing up hills. Then this episode happened and it changed, let's say, your physicality. And you then started taking part in races and events where you had to specialize in going downhill. Is that correct? Because I'm trying to understand, did you have to reorient your mountain biking style so you could cope with this medical event?
I won't say your question makes it sound like I became this downhill racer, and that's not the case. But I did become a much more proficient downhiller, maybe not racing, but just being able to go in areas such as various places in Utah. For my 65th birthday, a bucket list event was doing the, not the whole enchilada, but the porcupine, what is that called? Porcupine Rim Trail, which has a lot of very technical sections, and it's a big deal. I wasn't able to do the whole enchilada because the snow level was 8,000 feet at that time, and the whole enchilada goes to 11,000, so the shuttle only allowed us to go up. But that was a really big deal. I remember hooting and hollering at the end of that, and that has some very technical sections of, coming through that final little tunnel. It's like, I'm 65 years old, and I just did this, and just feeling very happy. But the way I was able to do that was taking clinics. And And with my quote unquote racing career over, the cross country racing, I actually saw sort of a healer type lady, and she said, "What is the gift in this?" And my response is, "This is not a gift at all. I've lost, what I like to do. I've lost my social group. I've lost this. I've lost that. It was not a gift." But then I started thinking about maybe now I can enjoy, instead of being in training mode and I have to do a certain ride and a certain level of effort, I can literally go out and smell the flowers. I can start leading beginner groups. I can start giving back to the community. I feel I'm kind of a natural teacher, but to be a halfway decent teacher, I needed to get better skills so I know that I'm properly making suggestions and recommendations to people. That has evolved, and I wanted to do a kudos to Alexis and Girls Rock. They are the ones who really helped co-fund all of us taking the BICP certified mountain bike instructor course. They've also had ride guide seminars and first aid clinics, and really helping us become not just folks who are taking women out for rides, but folks who know what we're doing when we're taking women out for rides. And it's been especially wonderful to become a certified instructor, learning I had a few bad habits and really being able to pass on that knowledge. So I just wanted to add that on to some of your previous questions, that Girls Rock has invested in its guides and its volunteers by really enabling us to be, literally at some levels of pro level. So that's really neat. So going back in terms of those challenges, I just had to literally pivot in terms of how am I going to use my mountain biking skills, and how am I going to become a better mountain biker, because I can't just sort of power up the hill the way I used to. I have to have better technique. So I have to really up my technical skills. And I remember just recently, Lisa and I were on this one little trail segment. It had some really tricky little uphill routes and things, and I made it up it. I was just so thrilled. And I did that partly because of technique, not that I've become this, real strong person, but, the technique really makes a difference in helping to make up for the fact that I just don't have the raw muscle power to just power up something. So that's pretty cool too.
Julia Starrett co-founded the Ready State and wrote the Built to Move book that is, one of my favorite books of last year. She champions simple foundational health habits. In this excerpt, she explains her base camp approach: sleep, movement, basic strength, that helps athletes and non-athletes stay pain-free and active for life.
Sure. It's pretty simple. And I'll just do a quick list and then we can talk about them more extensively. You need to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. There's no scientific dispute about this. Adults need to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. You've got to eat fruits and vegetables. We can talk about how much I think you should eat, and protein. You need to walk a lot. Human beings are meant to walk and move a lot. We need to get non-exercise activity. You need to be able to get up and down off the ground. You need to have some mobility in your body, especially if you don't want to end up in a nursing home. To me, those are the basic things. One of the things I love to add for an outdoor audience is lift weights. And the reason that I like to add that to an outdoor audience is that I think those of us who are in the outdoor space, we tend to do a good job already of getting the cardiovascular fitness, as sort of, the sort of hard cardio that we need in whatever our pursuits are. But we often we don't see ourselves as gym people. So we don't want to go spend the time that you have to spend in the gym to get strong and have a strong skeleton and a strong, sort of armor of muscle on our body that really will help us age. So I think those would be the things. If you, I'm sure many of your listeners also listen to Peter Attia and some of the sort of longevity experts. And, Attia says that, VO2 max is the thing, the most important thing for aging. And, and then if you listen to Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, having skeletal muscle mass is the thing. But to me, exercise is so personal. And it really is, such a part of who we are, and we all have different preferences. And so I don't really care how you get your cardiovascular fitness and work on your VO2 max. And I don't care, what type of weightlifting or strength work you want to do. But I think, man, you've got to eat fruits and vegetables. You've got to sleep. You have to give a crap about your mobility if you don't want to end up in a nursing home. You have to care about that. And you got to walk a lot. We're supposed to walk. I mean, honestly, I believe the prescription for older folks, and I'm talking older, like over 45, is like walk and lift weights. If people just walked enough and lifted weights, like we wouldn't even be having this conversation because we'd all be perfectly healthy.
Those principles make sense. It's, it's funny. They almost seem boring.
They're so boring.
But sometimes
they're not sexy at all. They're not sexy. And I get it. It's so fun. Like, it's so much more fun to be like, I'm getting my red light therapy and I'm sleeping on these magnets. And, it's way more fun to talk about those things at a party. Like, talking about how you got 8 hours of sleep last night is not cool. And it's hard to make a cool, fun reel on Instagram about that. But man, the amount of people, when you really dig deep and ask people what their habits are, and learn that they're not doing these things. They know they should be doing them in many cases, but they're not doing them. And they're definitely not doing them consistently. And, again, lots of fancy stuff you can add to that base level. But, it's almost like, you got to take chemistry 1A before you can take organic. One of the things that CrossFit did that I think is the most amazing, because it's sort of apart from CrossFit, is it popularized the home gym. And I could not be more of a fan of the home gym. When we first started our CrossFit gym in 2005, we had to, you couldn't get gym equipment anywhere. You can go into Walmart now and buy a kettlebell. If everybody had 2 dumbbells, a little bit heavier than they think, and 1 kettlebell in their house, a little bit heavier than they think, there's 1,000 things you can do with those 3 pieces of equipment. That's like a $100 investment in 3 pieces of equipment. And you can do 1,000 things. Like the kettlebell swing, I think, is one of the greatest movements. Like if you asked me what specific movement, like if anyone listening to this went and bought a kettlebell that's like a little heavier than you think. So don't go out and buy a 12-pound kettlebell. Like if you think you are good at a 24-pound kettlebell, buy a 36-pound kettlebell. And if everybody did 100 kettlebell swings 4 times a week, already major change. 100 kettlebell swings. You can leave your kettlebell in your living room. We have a kettlebell in our living room because sometimes we lose sight of, our day, and we didn't have time to train, and, we worked all day, and we're at home at night, and it's like you can do 10 sets of 10 kettlebell swings, and that counts. That's awesome. You can squat, you can press with 2 dumbbells, you can deadlift. I actually just made a video on my Instagram recently about 30 different moves, weightlifting moves you can do with just those 2 pieces of equipment, a pair of dumbbells and 1 kettlebell. And so I really think, especially for the folks who are more outdoorsy, I get it. It's not a group of people who wants to join a gym and drive there and go and do all these weightlifting moves with gym people. It's not a vibe for those people. I get it. Most, I'm friends with those people. Those are my people. But I think, if you've got room to store a surfboard or climbing equipment, you've got room to store a couple dumbbells and a kettlebell, and there's a lot of good work you can do. And you can type in, now there's so much free programming online. You can type in 20-minute kettlebell workout, and all you need is 1 kettlebell, and it'll give you a little, there's 100 programs you can choose from. You can do some little workouts in your living room or in your garage. So I think to me, that's the place to start for people, because I get it. A lot of people don't relate to gym culture, going to the gym. They're never going to do that. But I think, are starting to appreciate the need to be strong and have muscle mass. We don't need to overcomplicate it. There's a lot of work you can do with a couple simple pieces of equipment. And the reason that I love this test so much is the way to get better at this test is a few really simple practices, one of which I'm doing right now, which is sitting on the floor. Now, you'll appreciate this because you come from a culture where people sit on the floor, and as a matter of course. But in cultures where people sit on the ground, sleep on the ground, use the bathroom on the ground, there's actually significantly fewer orthopedic problems. There are way fewer hip replacements, way fewer incidences of lower back pain, and just generally folks who sit on the ground a lot have way fewer orthopedic problems. And it turns out sitting on the ground is one of the best ways that we know to get better at the sit and rise test. First of all, in order to sit on the ground, you have to do the test, meaning you need to lower yourself to the ground. And at some point, you need to get back up off the ground. So our recommendation is for people to endeavor to sit on the ground for 30 minutes a day. And the reason that this is so simple to implement into your busy life is that we know the data shows that the average American is watching 3 hours of television a day. And that's, by the way, apart from your smartphone use. That's like watching Netflix or whatever you're doing at night after you get home from work. So we recommend that you add in 30 minutes of floor sitting during that. I mean, more is better. If you're going to watch 3 hours of TV and can do the whole thing sitting on the floor, great. The other great place that you can slot this in if you're not a TV watcher, many of us are lucky enough to be able to work from home. So, I'm taking this podcast right now sitting on the floor in front of my couch. My laptop is up on the coffee table. And what's great is that, we're talking for an hour, hour and a half, and I'm getting an hour and a half of hip mobility work that's really sort of passive. And the reason that it works so well is that, partly because we've all gotten out of the habit of sitting on the floor, so it's not that comfortable for us in many cases. And so we naturally move positions. We sit crisscross applesauce. We long sit, which is our legs out in front of us. We're constantly changing positions, but that constant change of positions is actually taking our hips through all the ranges of motion that a hip is supposed to be doing. Sitting on the floor engages our core in ways that sitting in a chair doesn't work. There are just so many ways that sitting on the floor sort of help rewild our hips and make our hips do the things that hips are supposed to do. And it helps you be able to get up and down off the ground and do the sit and rise test without support. And it also just is such a quick and easy insight into your mobility. I mean, get up and down off the ground and sit on the floor. It's something that many cultures take for granted. When we're all in elementary school, we sit on the floor all the time. Nobody thinks it's a thing. And now if we go into a big group and we're lecturing and we say, hey, everybody, move these chairs out of the way and sit on the floor, people are groaning and, oh my God, and they're dying sitting on the floor. And that's a skill that we need to reclaim. And a really simple way you can work on your mobility without, foam rolling and doing a bunch of boring stuff. And you can incorporate it into doing things you're already doing, watching TV, working from home.
My bishop is one of the top mountain bikers in the US. He's nearing 50, yet still holds his own at pro level races. He talks about how dialing down volume but increasing the intensity and recovery lets him go ahead or lets him go head to head with riders half his age. You have been able to continue performing at the top of your sport for many years, for a long time. Any secrets to your consistency that you haven't spoken about or alluded to already, where let's say you have been able to keep going and manage to craft this incredible career out of mountain biking where maybe other contemporaries of yours were not?
Oh, absolutely. Many of the people that I raced with at the height of my cross country racing career are no longer doing it. And a big part of that, I think, is keeping it fun. You have to have fun be an anchor to what you're doing, having goals, but really relishing and enjoying, the process. Everyday training out there, is chasing that interval set or that mountaintop fun. And if it's not, make it more fun, That's a key to longevity. You have to keep it entertaining. You have to have your daily work be for you. It's an investment in yourself. It's an investment in your well-being, your health, and your confidence. I mean, you look at so many of the challenges we face in life, and we need a good skill set, a sharp tool box full of tools to deal with these things. And if you don't train it, you lose it. There's the rust all over your tools, so you need to, keep in the game. And then as far as competing at a high level, I'm pretty lucky to say it to the least, but I think that because I've been diligent with strength conditioning, that is probably one of the secrets. If there's a secret, I mean, it's not much of a secret. If you read about it, it's very well documented. The strength conditioning is so valuable for hormone health, for maintaining testosterone, human growth hormone, bone density, tendon, ligament strength, resistance to injury, muscle mass, all of these things. I mean, sound like the Huberman podcast now, talking about, some of the science behind it, but cognitive ability as well. So good mood, I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful mood enhancer, and you get a good workout in, you come back and you're just like, yeah, I feel great. Definitely. I would almost say that it's not that my performance is because of some magical thing. It's just because I need exercise. And because that is my therapy, that is my, because it is my therapy and because I go to it daily, that's kept me fit.
How has your approach to training, how has it evolved over the years as you've gotten older, keeping in mind like the incredible demands that some of these bike rides put on your mind and body?
Mm-hmm. I'd say the bigger, one of the bigger things that I need to pay attention to at almost 50 years old is recovery time. So I'm still able to perform at a very high level. The biggest hindrance, the biggest reason why people have deterioration of performance, of course, everybody wants to perform like they did when they were 30. The biggest reason I think that people have deterioration of performance is because they're not performing at the level that they want to in training. And that sounds like some sort of cryptic poem answer, but it's not. Take a very good look at what I said. They're not pushing themselves as fast in training. So if you're used to be able to do 400 watts for a 20-minute hill climb, then you need to be able to do 5x5 or 5x4 400 watts in training. You need to get good and on it. You need to push hard and have quality rest and keep the speed work, keep the power work, because that's the stuff that's hard to get. The endurance, I do one long ride a week, and wham, like, wow, that was amazing. My endurance is back. Well, it's just because I have all the capillaries and the mitochondria, and I don't need to train 30 hours a week. I need to do a very quality 15 hours a week or 10 hours a week even. And yeah, it does take a little longer to recover. And yeah, if I do a race last weekend that's too hard, then this weekend I might struggle a little bit to be on top of it and recover. But if I am, really aware of that in my planning, I can excel. I mean, I can do some incredible performances. I did a local mountain. It's one of my favorite hill climbs. It's like 1,500 vertical feet, 400 plus watts for 25 minutes. And if you ever gotten on a stationary trainer and tried to crank out 200 watts, it's like, okay, you can see that is among my best performances even at 30. even
Wow.
at 20. It's right up there. Not as good as my very, very best, but as good as some of my best ever seasons in my 30s. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, yeah, and I mean, the Monster Cross race, I won it in a sprint finish, against a young rider I coach who's a phenomenal sprinter, but it was like the correct savvy, not my best sprint ever, but perfectly applied at perfectly the right time at just, and I got the proxy finish to the bridge before the sprint. So it gave me like a little bit of a lead, coming off this really skinny bridge, and it was game over. Like, and you can have those moments, but you have to give yourself that chance. And if you let go of the rope and you gain the weight and you lose the cardio performance or that aerobic performance, it is twice as hard to get it back at this age. I had COVID in October.
Sure.
Finally. I didn't have COVID all throughout all this masking and COVID and vaccines and all this stuff. And I'm like, woohoo, it's done. And I got so sick. I was in bed, like, dying. I'm like, what is this? And sure enough, me and my wife had COVID. And I was like, wow, this is no joke. Terrible. I thought my lung function would never come back. Like, it was a month of just like wheezing and just kind of like, I don't know, riding at 70%. I mean, 75%. And I was like, this is my new level. I guess I'm done. Just done. But yeah, to be able to put a really good few performances this spring and, just to feel healthy, feel strong, be able to go out and, ride across mountains. Like, geez, I'm so glad I stuck with it. I'm so glad I stayed patient. And it's, and I'd say that ageless athlete mentality, it's not all about defiance. I mean, there's definitely elements of acceptance and kindness to yourself in that you have certain abilities or certain aspects. And I mean, I stop and look at the flowers more than ever. Like, I'm taking pictures of birds and I'm totally immersed in the places where I am on those days. But then also I'm locked in on the days when I'm working. Today was one of those. I was doing some pretty hard intervals and I wasn't taking my camera out to, do much videography of the landscape. And yeah, it's, I've been able to strike a balance, and I think from balance comes all good things, whether it be in personal life or whether it be in athletics.
Wayne Willoughby is another adaptive athlete who scaled El Capitan multiple times, affected from polio, which leads to all kinds of disabilities, where he has trouble even walking, moving around, and leaves his body in this brittle shape where he just gets injured very easily. But he has scaled El Capitan, again, that 3,000-foot rock face in Yosemite, not once, not twice, but a mind-boggling 26 times. And many of those ascents happened in a single day. He gets into the technical details of ascending thousands of feet of granite with limited use of his legs, proving that disability doesn't have to stop you from big dreams. Inspiring stuff. Can you describe to us what is climbing El Cap for you? And just for everybody's reference, also, what is the difference in a normal person climbing El Cap versus you climbing El Cap? You have climbed El Cap a record number of times.
Well, let's say for an adaptive climber.
Accepted. What I'm getting to is most climbers out there, 99.x% of all climbers, regular or different, they will never climb El Cap. Most of us will never climb El Cap. not only have you climbed El Cap, you have climbed El Cap and also other walls many, many times. Would love to hear in your words, what is the experience of climbing El Cap? What does it involve? How is it like there? How is it like being up on the wall and accomplishing that kind of goal?
For me, my life has been broken up into all these different chapters of after these injuries, after this car hit me, after this person assaulted me. And so there's different layers. Now, when I climbed El Cap the first time, I hadn't had these major injuries in 91 that really, like I couldn't even walk for a long time after that. I was able to do a lot more. And then as time went on, I had various different things. So it's really all been different through the years. And I actually had a pretty good run up until I had some pretty serious injuries in 2017, where I was climbing quite a bit and doing quite a few walls, and was at a point where maybe I was starting to get a little blasé about it and taking it for granted a little bit. Of a short period of time, I set a record on El Cap with my friends Hans Florine and Brian McRae on the route Bad Seed for my first one-day ascent of El Cap. And that was extraordinary. And then after that, I went through this, went through that, and got to a point where we set a record on a route in Zion, and then had more injuries. And even after those injuries, set a record, did the first one-day ascent of the Aid route on a route in Squamish on the Chief. And that was extraordinary to be able to do that.
I was reading a little bit about your ascent with Hans and Brian. I actually am familiar with Brian McRae. I think that he also goes by Flying Brian, I think. I used to climb at the New River Gorge where Brian left a legacy behind. I remember reading, Wayne, that your climbing style was so different than everybody else's because you could not use your entire body the same way. So in essence, you were doing, is that true? You were doing thousands of pull-ups.
Yeah.
How is that like? What do you have to do to get up on a wall? What's the routine like? How do you gear up? How do you start climbing? How do you exchange places in all of those 30 odd pitches to get to the top of that monolith?
Well, I wear a sit harness as well as a chest harness. I use skateboard elbow knee pads as well as, knee pads on my elbows and my knees. And I use a speed stirrup that Hans actually designed, that Yates makes. And it's just it's like as the name implies, a stirrup that goes around your foot with a little adjustment on it. And you clip that to your system. When you're jug, I have a chest harness. So I have my bottom jug between my sit harness and my chest harness. I'm connected from my sit harness to my jug. My chest harness and my sit harness, I have a jug in between. And then I have my top jug connected to the speed stirrup and connected to my bottom harness. So when I throw the top jug up and step up with the speed harness, then a lot of times I have to pull the rope underneath me through the bottom Jumar. And I also use my hands and my feet a lot on the wall. It depends. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm on the Chief, for instance, there's lots of places where I'm actually free climbing and just pulling my jugs up. And I can remember on one route I did on the Chief not that many years ago that I did a whole pitch. I free climbed the whole pitch and had to pull my jugs up as I was free climbing just for the heck of it, just because I could do it because it was easy free climbing. And I do mantles and I do, I'm actually doing a lot more than just Jumaring. And then when I'm on really steep routes, like on the southeast face where Bad Seed is, which is the route you were talking about that I did with Hans and Brian. And that was the first one-day adaptive El Cap ascent. And before I did that, I didn't even know how my body would react. I had tried cleaning. I did Lurking Fear in 94, was coming back from some major injuries. I had climbed the Diamond earlier that year and was carried in. And that's a big story in that I worked and got myself strong enough and used my poles to actually hike in and did 3 ascents of the diamond in a row many years later. But on this ascent of lurking fear that I did in 94, I tried to clean. Well, I didn't clean the 2 traverses because the pitches, it would just take me too long to clean them. They're traversing pitches. But I cleaned all the other pitches easily. It wasn't even a problem for me until I got to the top. And then I realized I had been overtaxing my right leg to the point where it didn't even move when I got to the top. And the next day I started getting a little bit back and a little bit, but it took a long time. And then I realized, okay, I can't really be carrying a rack and taxing this leg to that degree. After that, I started doing all my El Cap ascents, pretty much just my partner's cleaning. I would clean, if there was some gear that it would be helpful for me to clean and make it easier for the second or whatever, I would do things like that. But a lot of times it would make it harder if I wouldn't. Anyway, so that was hard for me because I wanted to do more. At one point I wanted to get back into leading, but at the same time, it's like anytime you are, especially with aid climbing, leading, even a small fall onto your harness can really screw up your back. So I decided leading is probably not in my best interests. I'm trying to just be able to walk, and then falling, landing on my legs, that's not going to, so it was really hard for me to say, all right, I'm going to be limited to just doing this. But at the same time, doing it in a day was a whole nother thing. So then once I started doing 1-day ascents, it was like, okay, all I'm doing is Jumaring. Yeah. But it's still hard for anyone, and for me especially. And then as, like I was saying about bad seed, I didn't know how I would react. I didn't know how I would do. Well, when we got to that last pitch, we actually got off route and we were on a record pace. After we went off route and then got back on route, we were behind the record pace. So then we just had to really, really, really start busting it out. And when we got to the top, I had this giant Esprit 11 mil rope. Oh my God, the thing it was like a steel cable. It weighed so much. And it was going to be most expedient to do the fastest time for them not to fix that rope and for me to clip it to my harness and jug the last pitch with that rope clipped to my harness and me just jugging the line that was already going to the top. And, that was like, whoa, I wouldn't have known that I could have found that within myself to do that had I not been there in that position. And we broke the record by 45 minutes.
Now, hang on. So is this the record for normal bodied people or is this the record for...
No, this was the record.
Oh, wow.
No, this was and that's why it was such a big thing for me, because it was the record for able climbers. And it was also the first 1-day ascent of El Cap by any climber. And then that opened up the door to me to start doing other 1-day ascents. When I did the nose in a day with Hans, I didn't really know how my body would react. And then I had, if it wasn't going to be difficult enough already, I had some Jumars given to me by a sponsor and didn't use my usual follow my proper protocol that I normally would follow and use the Jumars I usually use. One of those, and I only brought one of them. I brought the top Jumar, and it started failing on me around sickle, like 4 pitches up, and started sliding down the rope. And progressively, as we got higher and higher on the route, it would slide down and slide down and slide down. So that made it way harder. But we were on about a 13.5-hour pace, but we still did it in, I think it was 22, 21, I forget. It was, well under 24, not, super far under. But Hans wasn't too happy about that because we were on such a good pace. But he was a trooper, and that was incredible. I didn't know how my body would react without having a Jumar sliding, but I was able to, So it's really, it's like it's changed for me because of my improving my situation and then my situation being worse off because of this, because of that. So it's really never been static. It's never been like a consistent thing for a protracted period of time. And so that's really made my whole climbing career very interesting. maybe makes what I have accomplished that much more powerful when I really ruminate on it and really think about it and really reflect on it.
Okay, almost at the end here. Are you with me so far? Last, there is Tinker Juarez, a BMX Hall of Famer and a wildly popular mountain biker who raced the legendary Race Across America 3,000 miles in roughly 10 days. Tinker highlights the raw mental drive needed to ride hundreds of miles a day, sleeping only a couple of hours each. What is Race Across America? Are you literally riding your mountain bike or your bicycle across from one end of the country?
Right. The Ram is basically it's a Ram. Race Across America is called the Ram. It's on the road bike, but when I was doing the long distance on my mountain bike, and I go, man, I need to step it up. And so when I thought about the Ram, I seen it on TV, and I said, yeah, that looks like it should be good for me. So I gave it a shot. I had a good crew, probably had like 8 people to help out. And we started at Oceanside in California, and we raced all the way to Atlanta, Georgia. So it was like 3,000 miles and over 3,000 miles. It's a big event, and I gave it a try, and I survived, and I made it. I think I got like 3rd place, so I was happy with my results. It wasn't my kind of racing because what ended up happening is that, it's all about trying to ride without sleeping. So if you can ride your bike and keep on going, the less you can sleep and the more you can ride, the better your chances of winning a race. And as a long distance rider, my whole life, it's always been important to have good rest. Sleep is number one. In a Ram, sleep was not. If the less you sleep, the more you ride, the better chance you have of winning the race. And that just really wasn't, my type of thing. So I needed a little sleep. I got a couple hours of sleep every night and still was able to, it was mandatory at the time to sleep. You had to sleep about 3 hours max. So that was the reason why I ended up doing that race. But now you could do the ride without resting or sleeping. And so now guys that are doing the races are doing it at, I think, just under 8 days, something like that, the solo riders. Yeah. And that's incredible.
Wow. That's insane. How long did it take you?
At the time I did, it was like 10 days. I think it was just under 10 and a half days is what I think. That was because we had to stop and rest and all that. Now that the Ram has changed, you can go on and ride as long as you want and stop with it as long as you want. So it's it's totally changed. But I did do it a couple of years ago as a team, an 8-person team, and I thought, this is not going to be bad. Yeah, so I was able to rest. What they ride is you get a good amount of rest, and you get to see, at least this you're riding across the country, so you get to see a lot of the stuff that you didn't see when you're doing a solo.
This solo thing, I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around the idea of doing 3,000 miles in 10 days or 11 days. You're riding 300 miles a day. Most people would do like 100-mile long ride, and that would be like a capstone of their recreational cycling. You were doing 300 miles every day for 11 days with maybe a few hours of sleep. Did you ever fall asleep while you were on the road?
No, but I definitely felt tired. That's for sure. My legs were not moving. They were barely moving, and I was barely moving. It was really pretty painful just to go slow when you can't go any faster than what you're going. So it just seemed like the counting the hours were just, it seemed like it was taking forever. So, it was tough. It was really tough. But yeah, when you're seeing about 300 miles a day, Now my trainees a week is like 350 miles a week. So it's crazy to think that doing it in one day, 300 miles, but every day for that long.
That's it, folks. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ageless Athlete Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show just as much as I enjoyed creating and producing it. Whether you are an athlete looking to push your limits or someone striving to maintain a healthy, active lifestyle as you age, there is always something new to learn. From Ageless Athlete, we bring you a fresh episode each and every week. If you liked what you heard, we would love it if you would take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. And if you really liked what you heard, please leave us a review, crush those 5 stars on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your podcasts. It helps us reach more people who are passionate about staying strong and resilient, no matter their age. Don't forget to visit our website and leave your email so I can send you occasional insights, stories, and tips to keep you inspired and motivated on your journey. You can also follow us on Instagram at Ageless Athlete Podcast and on YouTube at Ageless Athlete Podcast as well for even more great content. All of these links are available on the show notes for this episode. This show is entirely produced by me, Kush Khandelwal, based out of California with the help of my trusted adventure pup, Roger. Until next time, keep challenging yourself. Keep pushing those limits. Stay mentally and physically fit. Continue doing what you love to do. And my friends, stay ageless. Friends, this is not an ad. This is just a quick message to those amongst us who are listening to Ageless Athlete podcast for the first time. I would love it if you would hit subscribe and follow on your favorite podcast app, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or what have you. We bring you stories and routines and other inspiration from elites in the world of the best outdoor sports. In each episode, you will find how these athletes stay connected to the outdoors, maintain peak performance, and continue to thrive as they age. I encourage you to look through prior episodes and listen to a couple and see if they resonate. And then, come back next week. We release an episode each week. And I am really inspired to bring you some of the best stories from the world of the outdoors. Okay, back to the show.